Peace be unto you. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to investigate the case of the missing Bismillah. Now, by that, I mean that every chapter of the Quran has a opening verse. It's called the Bismillah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, all gracious, all merciful. That's how it's translated. Now, there is a particular phenomenon, and that is that chapter 9 actually does not have the Bismillah. Now, that does affect the numerology of the Quran, because if you look at 114 chapters and if you go by the plain assumption that every chapter in the Quran has a Bismillah, then you'll have 114 Bismillahs, which is divisible by 19. So the 114 is equal to 19 times 6, right? So now the phenomenon is that chapter 9, by design, by method, by purpose, by accident, some would say, or by misplacement, has not got a Bismillah. But let us investigate why and how this is so. So the cadence is usually that I'll show you graphically a representation of what the basic claim is. We will dig deeper into with the data behind with SQL. Okay. Now, if you look at this visual representation here, what I'm focusing on chapter 8 till 27. Obviously, I could have put a graphic of chapter 1 to 114, but the focus area, this is where the area of interest is between 8 and 27. So after the 8th chapter, the 9th chapter, Al-Tawbah, doesn't have a Bismillah. Now, the claim is that this Bismillah is then represented in chapter 27 because it has two Bismillahs. Now, the displacement of this Bismillah from chapter 9 to chapter 27 is exactly 19 chapters. As you can see, I've put a counter here. You can see on chapter 9, I've put number 1. And as we count through, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And the 19th position, 19th chapter from chapter 9, chapter 27 actually has two Bismillahs, which is why this particular stack on this representation here is 2. So the y-axis is representing the number of Bismillahs. Obviously, we're saying every chapter has one Bismillah. 9 is missing one, 27 has 2, and obviously similarly from chapter 1 to 8, they all have Bismillahs, and 27 onwards to 114 have Bismillahs. So this graphically represents the claim. And interestingly enough, the key highlight here is that number 19 is underplaying in the missing Bismillah case as well. All right. Now, if you know anything about the Sana manuscripts, which is dated pretty much as old as manuscripts are, comparable to the Birmingham manuscripts, even in the lower text, in the Sana palimpsest, does introduce Surah 9 with the Bismillah formula on line 8 of folio 5a, but the following line then begins, La taqul bismi Allahi, do not say in the name of Allah. So somebody has made a note there that even though I'm writing Bismillah, this chapter doesn't have a Bismillah. And you can see various works on the Sana palimpsest, and palimpsest, there's basically an idea that this was, because it's palimpsest, it's written on parchment, it's used like a chalkboard, probably an early Sahaba, companion of the Prophet ﷺ, who had dictated to somebody in Yemen how to write, and they had written something that was a close approximation of what the formative text was, and then in the upper text, once they rubbed it out and put the formative text in, you can see that the notes underneath. So it's a learning and a teaching mechanism. Back in the day, it was very parchments were very expensive. But anyway, the point here is that even in that earliest and oldest manuscript, like the Sana manuscript, chapter 9 does not have the Bismillah. So this, as we see in our current day Quran. Okay, so what we'll do is, as is the cadence in my videos, we've made a claim, we've presented a claim, or somebody's made a claim, we've analyzed it just visually. What we'll do is we'll go and have a look at SQL, which is where I do all the work in terms of the real foundational stuff, is in my video 000. If you haven't been to my channel, if you have, great. If you haven't, please watch that video sometime, which will explain how the database has been set up, how I've modeled the Quran into an ERD, an entity relationship diagram, and created all of these schema that allows us to then have the data behind that we can interrogate. So I'm going to switch over to SQL now. Now, just a very quick 2-second overview of the database. It's got various tables in it. Obviously, I've got a whole bunch of stored procedures and functions as well. But from a data schema point of view, chapters are many verses. Verses are also made of words. I've got various tables here, word and word count. These are aggregate table about all the words in the Quran in different formations, in its repetitions and its position. Similarly, I've got a character count set of table, the count reference and char count. These basically represent every character used in alphabet used in the Quran. And then there's also the schema of the character set, which is based on the Hijai alphabet and also has Abjadi references in there as well. Now there's a reference between chapters and Revelation City, which is basically an ability for me to interrogate and explain that the chapter was revealed in a particular city. But the key tables here that are of interest are chapters, verse, word count, character count reference. Okay, now what we'll do, I've got these SQL pre-prepared. I'll go and have a look at the video 3001 metadata. Now, this is all about the Bismillah and the missing Bismillah. If you haven't seen my other video 3000, which is about the amazing Bismillah, that has a lot of good claims in it about the number 19 and how it basically interlocks and holds intact the number 19 over the Bismillah as well. But in this particular video, we're focusing on the missing Bismillah, right? So the Quran has 114 chapters and therefore 114 Bismillahs. However, one of the chapters doesn't have a Bismillah, so we're down to 113. However, it is made up by a Bismillah in another verse in another chapter. Okay, so we'll go and verify if these claims are true. Now, the very first query I'm doing over here is just to show you that Bismillah is a very common, the most common verse in the Quran. So we'll just run that and you can see that it will return 113. So of all the various verses in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the most frequent by itself, 113. I'll explain where the 114th one is, which is what we're investigating here. I just did a top 10 of the most common verses. Now I'm just going to run a English version for my Western audience. So you can see the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim written that way is the most common, 113 of those. Now, where did the missing Bismillah go? So over here, I'm doing a query. These were queries on the verses table. Now I'm going to stick with the verses table, but I'm only going to draw upon the verses in the verses table which are flagged as is basam, which means it is the Bismillah verse, right? And you will see, so that's what the qualifier is basam here is. There's a metadata, a field in my in this table that shows which ones are. And you can see, if I look at the messages tab here, 114 rows. So clearly there are 114 Bismillahs. Now, what are they? So if I just expand this out a little bit, you can see from chapter 1, you can see 1, 2, 3, everything's going smoothly, and then go 8, and then there's a gap. There's no Bismillah in chapter 9. So then it starts going smoothly again. So all the Bismillah verses here, so both the English and the transliterated form. And we keep going, not missing anything, 22, 23, 24. And voila, 27 actually has 2 Bismillahs. One is obviously the first, as I call the 0 verse. The only one where it's not called a 0 verse is in chapter 1, the very first verse in the Quran. The opening verse is considered a verse. The others are considered verse zeros of that chapter. So you can see the missing one between 8 and 10 is 9, but 27 has 2. Now, the way the Bismillah is, you can see the Bismillah ar-Rahman is there, but it's not by itself. It's got Inna min Salimana wanha Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It basically, it is from Solomon and is as follows. So it's talking about the Prophet Solomon, but still does say Qasam at the end of that verse. So that's why doesn't appear as a frequent verse because this entire thing is a verse, so that's why it drops out. But the Bismillah is there, as you can clearly see. And you can see I'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. It's basically in consecutive order, keeps on going, doesn't miss a beat all the way up to 114. So that's where the 114 Bismillahs are, and we just saw where the missing Bismillah was. It is in chapter 27 at verse number 30. So if you see chapter 27 over here has 2. Every other chapter is 1, but chapter 27 has 2. One at the 0th verse and one at position 30, included together with this in min Solomon who Bismillah Rahman Rahim. So that together with a verse linked to Solomon, Prophet Solomon. Okay, now what we'll do next is look at the first verse by itself, so you can get an idea about. I did this in detail in my video 3000, but let's have a quick look. You can see verse 1, chapter 1, Bismillah Rahman Rahim, which is the same in every other one, but there's some metadata about it. You can see that it has 19 characters as well, and we're just focusing on the fact that it's got 19 characters. Like I say, it's covered in detail in my video 3000 about the amazing Bismillah, but again, over here you can see the length of the Bism. I've got a user define function which I use. Given an Arabic text, it tells you how many characters, and you can see that it is 19. Another way to verify, I've got that char count table, another aggregate table. Just to repeat the formula, you can see both the Arabic version and the English transliterated form have 19 characters. So that's just a quick reference back to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim also having 19 alphabet. Now, the next part, this is just a few more queries just to get the point home. If we now look at the Bismillah verse one more time, we saw this before, 114 rows, and obviously you can see all these verses, and they are 114 Bismillahs, the two that are in 27, we just saw that before. Now, if to work out the difference between, so this is going back to that graphical claim, that there are 19 chapters that separate these two. So the simple way to do it in mathematics is you subtract and add 1. So do a select 27 minus 9. So we saw the appearance of the second Bismillah in chapter 27. It's missing in chapter 9. And to work out the difference, you select and minus. I'm doing a select of 27 minus 9 plus 1, right? Run that query, you can see 19. So basically, that proves that there is a gap of 19 chapters between the two Bismillahs. Now, let's just have a quick look at these three interesting chapters here. 8, which is the one preceding chapter 9. 8 has a Bismillah, 9 doesn't. 27 is where it appears again. I'll just get some data. The first, basically, this is the chapters table now. We're just getting some metadata about these chapters. So Al-Anfal is chapter 8. You can see it has the Basm. Chapter 9 is At-Tawbah, what is frequently known as. It doesn't have the Bismillah. And chapter 27, An-Naml, which has the Bismillah. So it is the Bismillah at the beginning of those two chapters, but 9 is missing. That's just a quick reference on the focus on 8, 9, and 27. Now let's look at verse 0 and 1 of chapter 27, just to see if there is anything peculiar about it. So what we've done is, you can see the 0 verse of chapter 27, like every other chapter apart from 9, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? Which is the Basam, name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Then it just goes on to the next verse. I'm only showing you 2 verses, but if I now go to chapter 9 and show you the top 5 verses of that chapter, you can see that lists the 5 verses. There's no verse 0, so it's missing the Bismillah. And this is the At-Tawbah chapter, and only listing 5 verses, just to show you that there is no Bismillah, definitely. Okay, now if we go to the previous chapter, chapter 8, also you can see that it has a Bismillah at verse 0, chapter 8, and then obviously goes into the next verse. normally does. But what I want to show you here is that if you look at the verse sequence, so from the beginning of the Quran, I've got a field called verse sequence, which basically just keeps a counter going for which verse sequence it is. You can see that verse sequence where the Bismillah is in chapter 8, the preceding chapter to the chapter that is missing the Bismillah. Remember, chapter 9 is missing it. We are getting a verse sequence number of 1167, as you can see right there, right? So I just want you to remember that sequence at which Bismillah appears in chapter 8 is 1167. And this is a bonus finding, by the way. Now, if you then, let's now look at what the verse sequence is, where the Bismillah should have been or would have been if we present verse 0 and 1 of chapter 9, we'll see there's no verse 0. So now, instead, there's a verse 1, which is missing the Bismillah, but that verse sequence now is 1, 2, 4, 3. The point I'm trying to get to is, what is the difference between the verse where Bismillah is in chapter 8 to the verse where the Bismillah should have been? And you can do this simply by a little maths here, selecting and subtracting 1, 2, 4, 3, which is where the Bismillah should have been, to where the last Bismillah is, chapter 8. You do a query of that, you'll see 76. But what's so special about 76? Well, so it happens again that 76 is a factor of 19, wholly divisible by 19, so 19 times 4. So that's pretty much the video wrapped up. Now I'll just summarize it. That's all in SQL. We'll go back to the PowerPoint to wrap up and summarize. In the case of the missing Bismillah, this claim is also made in the book, A Visual Presentation, which has been the focus of a lot of my videos in this series. Now this is pretty much a very summarized version of the finding. Bismillah is the opening verse and has 19 letters. We proved that, and obviously a much more detailed version of all of these findings is on the Amazing Bismillah, video 3000 on my channel. But in this particular case about the missing Bismillah, from the missing Bismillah, chapter 9, to the replacement Bismillah in chapter 27, there are 19 chapters. There's a, you know, that gap is 19 chapters. That's amazing. Bismillah is restored to 114, basically, because it was missing from one of the 114 chapters, but there's a double in chapter 27, as we saw. So again, the underpinning, the encoding, which is what I'm hearkening to over here, is that 19 is underplaying behind the missing Bismillah as well. Now, the last check we did in SQL was this verse sequence separation. We saw that the Bismillah at chapter 8, the previous one to chapter 9, where it should have been, is 1167. The verse sequence at the position where Bismillah should have been is 1243. If you subtract the two, you get 76. 19 times 4 obviously is 76. And 19, therefore, is very much intrinsic to the missing Bismillah as well. Interesting, isn't it? Now, in conclusion, to wrap up this video, various claims are verified that number 19 is encoded. I have verified a lot of these in my other video, video 3000, which is a fascinating video because it's got some animation from another. I sort of do a reaction to some fantabulous numbers that this person presents through gematria and other gematria, whichever way you want to say it, a mathematical, almost like a fractal type of pattern inside the Quran. The missing Bismillah also in this video I've shown that is also 19 encoded. So what do we do next? I have been prolonging the release of my Y19. So obviously my videos are showing the number 19. So naturally the question would be Y19. So I'm preparing that video. I haven't finished it yet. I actually haven't even started it yet. So once I get that up, it is in my plan to do. Please watch video 000 on Quran SQL DB design and setup if you are curious about how SQL was set up. Where did I get the data from? What does my SQL database model look like? Also, if you want, I really recommend you watch video 3000 on my channel, the Amazing Bismillah, which really is a really good, I think there's about 9 claims which show an interlocking number 19. I actually prove every claim that was made in the video by a gentleman from, I believe, from Russia or Uzbekistan. So that was pretty much it on concluding on this video. Now, wrapping it up for Q&A, if you do have any questions, and please feel free to post it on my channel against this video as well. If you like to leave a comment or feedback, I would appreciate it. You know, it's as long as it's respectful and considerate, it's definitely, I'm here to learn. These claims and SQL is probably where I underpin my strengths, so I'm basically going to stick to what I know best, which is IT and technology. But if there's anything you want to provide me, if you want to provide me positive comments to encourage me or to also highlight any issues with the videos, happy to take them. My channel is a reason, therefore I am. Peace be unto you. Good night.